Hi, everyone. Arena 9, and thank you for joining us. A federal judge is sending Paul Manafort to jail. The former Trump campaign manager was ordered into custody over new obstruction of justice charges after allegations of witness tampering. He's also awaiting trial for bank fraud and other charges stemming from his connection with pro-Russian groups. And the president tweeted this just a short time ago. Wow, what a tough sentence for Paul Manafort, who has represented Ronald Reagan, Bob Dole, and many other top political people and campaigns. Didn't know Manafort was the head of the mob. What about Comey and Crooked Hillary and all of the others? Very unfair. To be clear, Manafort has not been sentenced or convicted at this point. Well, this comes just hours after President Trump distanced himself from Manafort, saying that he actually had nothing to do with his campaign. Paul Manafort was, in fact, President Trump's campaign chairman from June to August 2016. Well, those comments came this morning as the president took questions from reporters at the White House on everything from immigration to North Korea. And earlier, during a Fox News interview, the president blasted a Justice Department report's findings that there was not political bias in the FBI's handling of the 2016 campaigns.
The end result was wrong. I mean, there was total bias. I mean, when you look at Peter Strzok and what he said about me, when you look at Comey, all his moves. So I guess, you know, it's interesting. It was a pretty good report. And then I say that the IG blew it at the very end with that statement, because when you read the report, it was almost like Comey. He goes point after point about how guilty Hillary is. And then he said, but we're not going to do anything about it. The report, the IG report, was a horror show. I thought that one sentence of conclusion was ridiculous.
But at the same time, the president refuted the report's findings. He also told reporters today the report actually exonerates him.
I think that the report yesterday, maybe more importantly than anything, it totally exonerates me. There was no collusion. There was no obstruction. And if you read the report, you'll see that. Here's the good news. I did nothing wrong. There was no collusion. There was no obstruction. The IG report yesterday went a long way to show that. And I think that the Mueller investigation has been totally discredited.
Joining me now from the White House, CBS News Washington correspondent Paula Reid, and from our Washington bureau, CBS News political correspondent Ed O'Keefe. Paula, let's start with you on Manafort. What are you learning about these latest developments today in court?
Well, special counsel is really turning up the heat on Manafort. Not only are they charging him in 2 separate districts with dozens of counts, they have flipped his co-defendant. Now he's going to jail for violating the terms of his bail. He allegedly tried to tamper with some witnesses in his case. So now special counsel got exactly what it wanted, which is Paul Manafort in a cell somewhere with time to think about whether or not he really wants to fight through 2 trials with special counsel, or whether he wants to cooperate and tell them what he knows about what happened during the campaign.
And earlier, the president said that Manafort had, quote, nothing to do with his campaign. I want to play that bite for you.
Paul Manafort worked for me for a very short period of time. He worked for Ronald Reagan. He worked for Bob Dole. He worked for John McCain, or his firm did. He worked for many other Republicans. He worked for me, what, for 49 days or something? A very short period of time. I feel badly for some people because they've gone back 12 years to find things about somebody, and I don't think it's right.
Does this argument stick, Ed?
No, because he worked for the president, and it was during those 49 days that a lot of the questions that the Mueller investigation appears to be looking into arise from. And look, Manafort was a critical component of the campaign at a very important time. They were trying to shore up support from delegates to the Republican National Convention. Manafort was one of fewer than 10 veteran Republican operatives in the country who even understood how the process worked. And so he was lucky to have him, frankly. And you know, the president can try to disassociate himself now, but at the time he was intimately involved in all of the operations of the campaign. It's an old argument he's been making for quite a while. What I think is even more interesting is that the president seems to think that that report released yesterday, the IG report, had anything to do with him. That was an investigation into an investigation of Hillary Clinton's use of private email. It had nothing really to do at all with the president, other than the fact that it was the president and his supporters on Capitol Hill who basically pushed for the publication of that report at all. But a pretty remarkable day of comments from the president on a host of issues.
Yeah, remarkable is right. Paula, I also want to get you to touch on that, the fact that the president's claim that the IG report exonerates him, that this was not about the Mueller investigation. What do you think he's getting at here?
Well, there is a grain of truth in this. Let's be clear. The IG report had nothing to do with the president himself. This was an evaluation of the FBI's performance in the Clinton email investigation, which the president has said was botched, it was rigged. Well, the IG found the opposite. They said, look, the outcome was appropriate, her interview was appropriate, and there was no prosecutable case. But the nugget of truth in what he's saying is that a pair of investigators who worked on both the Clinton email investigation and the Russia probe, they exchanged some text messages that were very critical of the president and his supporters. One specific text message that the IG uncovered suggests that one of these investigators tells someone else that he's going to, quote, stop candidate Trump from becoming President Trump. It's this specific text message. It's one piece of evidence in a 500-page report that the president and his allies have really honed in on. And the IG didn't give these investigators a pass either. He said about these two specific people that their text messages and their actions, they have brought discredit certainly to themselves and so doubts about the integrity of the FBI. So the president, yes, he is correct in that it validated some of the claims that he has made about some political bias existing in the FBI. But overall, this report was certainly not a vindication of the president himself. It had nothing to do with the president.
And I want to also ask you at the same time, we know that the president says that the inspector general got it wrong, that there was no FBI political bias. Can he have it both ways on this issue?
Certainly, Democrats and Republicans are trying to have it both ways. Everyone seemed to be upset with the FBI's performance during that investigation, either because of those agents that Paula mentioned who sent those messages critical of now President Trump, and Democrats who say, look, this all proves that Comey, the former director, put his thumb on the scale by so elaborately and publicly announcing the decision not to investigate and then reopening things just a few days before the election to announce that they were looking in the Anthony Weiner's inbox. So, you know, in journalism, we talk about if you're upsetting everyone on either side of a story, maybe you're doing your job right. It seems perhaps that the FBI should be living by that mantra as well. They have upset everybody. And I would suggest perhaps that they too were doing their jobs. But clearly, as this investigation shows, there were some bad actors and some improper steps taken by various officials over the course of the campaign or over the course of the investigation.
Paula, you know, the president also said that he hasn't spoken to his personal lawyer, Michael Cohen, in a long time. I want to play you that bite.
I always liked Michael Cohen. I haven't spoken to Michael in a long time.
Is he still your lawyer?
No, he's not my lawyer, but
Your
anymore.
personal lawyer, and not
But
anymore.
I always liked Michael.
Are you?
And he's a good person.
Are you
and I
worried that
think
he will
he's
cooperate?
been. Excuse me. Do you mind if I talk?
I just want to know if you're
You're
worried
asking me a question. I'm trying to ask
Just
it.
want to know if you're worried if he's going to cooperate with federal
No, I'm not worried
investigators.
because I did nothing wrong.
Got it.
Nothing wrong.
Paula, does putting distance between himself and Cohen help the president?
Probably not, because the more distance and the silence that exists between him and his former personal attorney, the more likely it is that someone like Cohen would be willing to cooperate with investigators and share what he learned when he was part of the president's inner circle. Now, Cohen's situation right now is that in New York, he is under investigation, both at the federal and state level, for various business transactions that he engaged in, and also potential campaign finance fraud over that $130,000 payment he made to Stormy Daniels to stay quiet about her alleged affair with the president. I've spoken to sources close to his case. He does expect to be charged with something, but he doesn't know yet if he wants to cooperate with the federal government, with the special counsel investigators in exchange for less jail time or fewer charges. That's the calculus that he and his family that they're trying to make right now. And silence probably doesn't help improve his relationship and his loyalty to the president. But as an attorney, I can tell you that's what I advise my client to do. Would be like, do not talk to them. Do not reach out. It could be misconstrued. Just look at Paul Manafort. Let's learn from him. Do not reach out. Say nothing.
Distance can be your friend in a situation like this. Ed, I do want to ask you, though, you know, at the same time, he says he feels really badly for Michael Flynn, but now claims that maybe Michael Flynn didn't lie. If you step back for a second, originally, he actually said that he fired Flynn for lying to Vice President Pence. What do you make of this back and forth argument?
It's just as mind-boggling as so many other things that the president says at one time or another. Look, we know, based on reports at the time, that he misled the vice president, who then went out on national television on Face the Nation and basically, you know, conveyed what Flynn had told him inaccurately, and that's why he's out of a job. And we know the president in recent weeks has expressed a lot of concern and sympathy for those who've been caught up in all this. Manafort being one of them, Michael Cohen another, Michael Flynn in another case. But look, until we see evidence otherwise, part of the reason he was dismissed, or the primary reason he was dismissed, is because he misled the vice president and all of the other issues that he's now facing in a court of law. So it's, you know, the president once again demonstrated today that he has a tendency to go off the cuff, to say things that may or may not be what he really believes, or may be sarcastic, certainly in some cases are not rooted in fact. And it's just another day at the White House. The difference today was that he opted himself to go out onto the driveway there just behind Paula and do it himself in a free-wielding way, and in a way that we've never seen a president do, you know, in modern history. So, you know, once again, it's a newsy day at the White House, and it's because the president himself went out and talked to reporters.
And just tell you guys, I thought today the big story would be tariffs on China.
Nope. It's lucky if it makes the papers.
All right. Changes minute by minute. Paul, Reid, Ed O'Keefe, thank you both for joining us.